back to Cambridge InsideOut. I'm Judy Nathans.
And I'm still Robert Winters.
Yeah.
Live with it.
Live with
Right.
it. Yeah.
All right, so we talk a lot about budgets,
Yeah.
budget hearings and whatnot. We did have a city council meeting, and there were a few interesting moments in that relatively short meeting.
Yeah, it was relatively short, like 2 hours, maybe in 40 minutes or something.
Yeah. So let's see. So there wasn't a whole lot in. I should mention once again, the big thing, the controversy about the divest from Hewlett Packard that everybody's been threatening. Apparently,
I did read one actually pretty eloquent letter.
There was
from
a really-
two people I know.
Yeah.
Do you know Jeff Petroselli?
I read that letter as well.
Yeah, I mean they've been there. And,
Yeah.
I mean I understand all that, and I guess it's happening in lots of countries, but
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know how I feel about it.
Yeah. Well, anyway, it's starting to look more and more like,
It's
in
not
fact,
gonna come
this
up.
thing that everybody was
Well,
getting
it's
all
got to
worked
be
up about.
sponsored by a counselor, yes?
I shouldn't name the name, and I won't. But there was only
Okay.
one. I think there's only one counselor who was thinking about sponsoring it,
All
and
right. Well, we'll see what happens then. Let's just leave it at that.
and all it takes is one sponsor. But the thing
Right.
is then ultimately it would either get voted up, down, passed along, or whatever.
Bring out lots of people
And I
for
don't think that
discussion.
the
Maybe
rest
they
of
don't
the
want to spend the
councilors.
time.
I
Well,
don't
they
think
know
they
they
wanted
would
to
bring
be-
out 2 hours of public comment. Well, maybe not.
I don't think
bring
they.
out a lot of public comment.
Right, but I think that it's not there's certain votes that are not easy votes to take, not because it's
Right.
consequential, but because some people who like you might not like you afterwards.
It's a pretty
Or-
controversial one, and because it's not directly affecting the city, and I know we're human rights and progressive, that maybe they'll say, you know what, let's just
We can do
pass
without
on
it.
this one. There's
Yeah.
so much else that we're dealing
Yeah,
with that we have to take a stand on that. And I guess I
No,
can see that as
honestly,
better not to deal with it. That's not to say they don't agree
as
with
they
it
say,
or anything.
discretion is the better part of valor.
And you
in
can
this
get
case.
people personally can register their
Yeah, oh yeah.
their
Yeah, since the
their
city
voice.
council has no say in it anyway,
right. So you
Just
as an
drop it.
individual, I think if
Drop
you
it,
care
yeah.
about it, do it.
do what you
know?
want. Yeah. So anyway, so there was that. There were a few other items that were of some significance. One of the things that I found very interesting, there were two items that had to do with parking.
One that charter righted or that
Right. So the thing is so there was I think it was I forget who exercised his or her charter right last week.
Mark McGovern charter
McGovern?
righted that one. Yeah.
So there was there was basically a proposal from Councilor Zondervan
right.
that said we should increase the resident permit parking fees.
Right.
Councilor Simmons wasn't thrilled that he said because basically it read like because Somerville charges 40, therefore we should charge 40.
Well, not till 220.
Right.
or
But
something,
but while neglecting to say but Boston charges 0, right?
yeah. Do they?
So yeah. So the thing is that the question of it, should you charge, should you not, should you increase the fee, should you not, what? I actually think that Gary Mello of all people, actually, I don't know if we mentioned this last week, he actually made a pretty good point.
Was this public comment?
Public
I didn't
comment
hear that.
last week
Oh.
about this, and he said that there's a lot of people, people don't keep cars forever, not like they used to, like me. I keep mine for decades. Most people don't. So what is actually the sense of doing the parking permit renewal every year? Why not when you he
Change your car.
just threw out a number and he said why not when you register one time,
Yeah.
pay $50 one time, you put your sticker and the sticker stays on there, it's got a code on it,
Yeah.
and then
Or
after
the
a
life
while
of the car. Yeah.
yeah, and then just do that. So why are you going through this ritual of everybody lining up or mailing in their utility bills?
Well, I think effectively they make more money that way. They
But
do.
the thing is that this isn't really supposed to be about raising revenue.
But it should break even.
It
I
should
guess it
break
breaks
even.
even.
Right, but the thing
Yeah.
is that you could break even if you got rid of all those processing costs, because right now,
That could be.
the cost of actually
But
processing
those
is-
employees aren't extra. They're still employees. They just would be doing something.
Right, but
extra.
everybody, they have to pile it on during,
Well, I know. I was
December,
there
January.
doing stuff for the
Right.
composting.
But
program,
I heard that and I said, that actually makes some sense to me.
yeah.
Why don't you just get your sticker? I mean, of course, we all like to have our stripe of 47 different stickers
I don't
across the
think
back
they're
window.
allowed that anymore.
No, like
That's crazy.
they tell you should like take a razor blade and take off the old one, but
Well, yeah.
hey, listen, if Justice Stephen Breyer can
did
leave
he
a
do it?
stripe of 12 stickers across the back of his Volvo, then I figure we're doing something good. I'm just doing what the Supreme Court justices are doing. That's
I
all.
see, yeah, well.
No fault on me, little old me.
Mm.
Right. So anyway, you know, I kind of like my decorations on the back of my bus, but you know, just having one good sticker, that'd be
Yeah.
fine. So maybe there are different ways of thinking about this, and
Yeah,
my personal feeling always is that when people bring this up, it's because they in some rather minimal way they're thinking, well, let's just increase the fees, and this way more people will give up their vehicles.
well, that's
But
ridiculous.
that's just ridiculous.
But in their
Unless you
defense,
jack it up to $1,000.
I have a driveway and I have a car, but I love having that permit because I can park anywhere in
Everywhere.
Cambridge, and let's face
Yeah.
it, that's really what it's worth.
That's really what
And
it's
and I personally, I would pay more than that to have it, but because I can. And if you want to then say, well, that's too expensive for other people, then maybe you could have two
Right.
levels of permits. One that you get to park in your neighborhood, and one that you
A
have
city
more to
one.
park anywhere in the city. Actually, I just came
Good
up with
idea.
that. That's a good idea.
Oh my gosh. That's
You know, I like that. Anyway,
You know, honestly, I
But
just like letting everybody.
I
just
think
have
it could
you
be
know.
more. And look, I'm a senior. I don't actually have to pay anything.
Right.
But I can give extra, and I did last year, and I probably should do it again.
Well,
so,
it actually relates to some of the other
yeah.
discussions in that there is a kind of a mindset that goes to the point of ideology, to the point of absurdity at times, which is that we should be removing as many people from motor vehicles as is humanly possible
yeah,
because, you know, climate change or whatever. The reasons have changed over time. Once upon a time, it had to do with air pollution and health. And then it became because of climate change.
well, fossil fuels are getting. I just heard something today that it's really going up, and this whole Iran deal. You know that.
Yeah.
What's his face like said no.
Right. And the thing is, I appreciate all of that.
Yeah,
I'm not trying to be dismissive of it
No.
all. But the thing is, there comes a point about just reasonability and reasonable accommodation. And to me,
Incremental changes.
yeah, and just sort of cutting people a little slack, for God's sake.
Yeah.
You know.
No, I
So-
mean, and I think those voices exist on the council.
But
They
you know,
do.
we've had
Yeah.
councilors who are advocating having cities zoned, you know, so that if you live in East Cambridge, you can park in East Cambridge, but then if you go park else, you got to feed the meter, and you know, and there are other people who are the real whack jobs who say like, well, there are much better uses for a public asset of the street, you know. I go, oh, really? What are you going to do, right? You know, to me, I actually look upon on-street parking as a reasonably progressive ideal in that we're all sharing something as opposed to owning all our own, right?
Yeah.
That's not a bad thing. And we can accommodate people who visit, you know.
You know,
It's not a
I'm
problem.
going to say something that's really, I don't know, you can take this either way. I walk around, and as I'm getting older, I said, there are too many cars. I own a car, I drive, sometimes short distances, I walk a lot. So I'm of two minds here, because I do see the issue. It's like,
I
but
don't
on the other
disagree.
hand, I think it's all moderation. I don't
Yeah.
drive more than 5,000
I
miles
think-
a year. I don't fly either a lot. And people that
We-
get all up in arms
Right.
about their bicycling, but maybe they make 4 plane trips a year. That's almost my carbon quotient. So anyway, let's be reasonable here and give people
when
choices.
you present
you know.
bicycling, and again, I'm a
Yeah.
55-year plus cyclist, but
Yeah.
when you present bicycling as the preferred alternative,
That's
what
crazy.
you're basically saying
Yeah.
is, because let me tell you, the cross section of cyclists is not representative of the broader community
No, they're
in
young.
terms of
a lot of
demographic,
them are,
race,
they're
etc.
mainly
So
30 somethings and under.
right,
And,
you know, so
yeah.
so the thing is, and people do get older, and
Yeah.
you may need that, you may feel the need, or you may simply want to use a motor vehicle at times. So
But to start when you're older is pretty risky.
It is pretty risky.
It can be done, and people. I
Right.
prefer walking, and that's my
Yeah.
mode, and that can be tricky.
But you know, there's
But,
there's this whole matter of a carrot and a stick, you know, and
Yeah,
when somebody says, so right now the resident permit parking fee is up to, what is it,
it's just 25.
25 or 30?
Yeah, it's
25?
25, I think, isn't it? Oh,
Right. Well, once
Yeah.
upon a time it used to be 4, then
or
it was
10,
8,
15, yeah, it's
jumped,
25,
and then it was
I think.
10. And
Yeah.
so maybe at
So
25.
they
Went to
basically
20, then
wanted,
25.
they wanted to go to 30 and then 40, which
Right.
is, I
Now,
don't think that's
To me, that's
unreasonable at
not
all.
unreasonable, but the point is that why are you doing it? Are you doing it because you needed the revenues to have it be a break-even system? And if that's
Right.
the case, then there's maybe the Gary Mello idea might be a better way to do that.
Yeah,
Or are
I
you
think
doing
it's it won't.
I have
Right.
I know there have been candidates and city councilors, maybe they don't speak too loudly this way, but they have said, I've heard them say,
Yeah.
they said, oh, it really should be $400 a year
Wow,
because
that
that's
would
what
be-
it really costs. And they use as a comparison
That's crazy.
the fact that if you had to pay for parking, private parking, and I hear that and I go, well, yeah, but I also, by the way, do sign a check for my real estate taxes, and that ain't cheap. The rate may be one of the lowest in the state, but the property values are not. So it's still a lot of money. And so to me, getting the fact that I can park where I want in the city is
Also,
like
some
it's like an
communities you have to
acknowledgement.
pay for your trash pickup. So let's
We don't,
just
right.
we have a lot of services in this city
Yeah.
too. So
So I think just
I think the issue is
let people
more
be.
to first of all this whole thing about if you can't afford the 40. Come on, if you own a car, you can't afford 40 a year. I mean, that to me is a little unreasonable. But anyway,
no, I mean
I get it.
the jumping
Okay.
to 40, that's not going to break anybody. But the thing is that if you're just doing it because you're trying to say bad driver,
Yeah, no.
then I don't appreciate that.
But I think if it costs more to send, then you need to look at some other like Gary Mello's idea or even my
Well,
idea.
the other thing too is that so some people would argue that by changing bicycle infrastructure, what you're doing is you're making it easier and more attractive to use other modes. But let's also make all other modes more attractive. Like, wouldn't it be nice if the buses ran on time? Wouldn't it be nice if the routes were better? But of course, that's not something the city controls. That's MBTA,
Yeah.
right? But I'll tell you something. When a city councilor says, "Well, we think that somebody who teaches in the Cambridge Public Schools but who lives a few towns away, that they should hop on a bike or a hubway and bicycle in, or else, or they should take public transportation." Because there is a bus, or you can come into Central or whatever.
So they have to drive.
When I've had to go to meetings not far away, like this
Yeah.
in Newton Center, and I said, I'm going to take the T. Okay, so that takes me like an hour,
You can't do it.
and if I hop in a
And
car,
you don't
I
even
can
have
do it
kids.
in 20
What if you
minutes.
had kids? Get
It's
them
a
to
totally
school and stuff.
different equation.
You're gonna have to have a car. I do think
Yeah.
there has to be solutions for people that work for
Right.
the city.
So there was a
Yeah.
proposal from councillors Malin and Siddiqui on the
And that was
agenda last
interesting.
night.
Yeah,
Whether-
specifically related to Inman
Inman
Square, but it
Right.
really needs to be broadened and look at the whole
and
issue.
it's partly in
Explain what
common.
it is to look at.
All right, so they say basically the idea is that there are people who are working in businesses in Inman Square. There is no major T stop at Inman Square, so you could
There's
walk
a bus,
from Central.
but yeah.
Someday you'll be able to walk from Union Square, right? But not today. There are buses, the 69 bus and other buses go either through there or near there. So, it's not without public transportation, but public transportation is, if a bus runs every 40 minutes, and if you have to switch and go through 2 or 3 different buses to get somewhere, or a bus and a train or whatever, it may actually reach the point where it just doesn't make any sense. And I've heard from, I think it was Josh Gerber from 1369 saying how it's not easy because people who work at 1369,
They're coming from other places.
they probably can no longer afford to live in and around Cambridge or Somerville,
But they may not have cars either.
and they may not have cars. So, well,
Yeah. Well, I guess some of them might. But.
right. So the thing is, what they do if they don't have cars, they say, "Well, I'm sorry, I can't work." So actually, finding people who are going to be willing to work there isn't always such an easy thing. So you sort of have to meet people where they are, and if that means acknowledging the fact that maybe we should accommodate some people somehow, but as Mark McGovern and Louis DiPasquale, city manager, and others pointed out last night at the council meeting, it's like, well, if you think that because somebody's working in a business in Inman Square should get special consideration.
What about the school
What about the school
employees,
teachers
the
who
city
said we
employees?
don't, we live outside
Yeah.
of the city, we've been asking for accommodation, you didn't do it for us,
What?
right?
Well, there is a garage under the school. Yes, parking
Yeah,
under the library and the school. Are school
Right.
teachers allowed to park there? Because that's
depends on the schools. I mean, the thing is that it's.
it is a pay thing. But I
Right.
wonder if a teacher gets
I think maybe
dispensation.
that you would think they would do that, at least
Yeah.
that,
I
right?
mean, I don't know how big it is, but
Yeah. So
So it was brought up that
now, by the way, there used to be a way, and I will tell you without identifying the location. It's still done in some places. There is this notion that somehow every single on-street space in the city of Cambridge either is resident only
or meters.
or metered.
But no, that's not true.
That's
You're
not
right.
true.
In some business areas, it's just
Now, they went through
Yeah.
this actually brings us back to the parking freeze.
Yeah.
There was a time back, I
Yeah.
think when Lauren Preston was in charge, George Chiso may still have been in charge, I'm not sure,
Hmm.
where as part of the settlement to get parking spaces into the parking bank that you could make available.
So they had to count parking spaces?
So, yeah, but there was a rule. It was part of the settlement, I believe, that said
Yeah.
for every 2 on-street spaces you regulate,
Oh.
you get to put 1 in the bank.
Oh.
And then that would be then available if we were permitting some new building or whatever.
interesting.
So there
what
was a
happened
period
then?
of time where they
Yeah.
went, like for example, where I live on Broadway,
Mhm. Near the
all of
Lockdown,
the street,
yeah.
because it was a commercial strip, mixed
Right.
residential commercial.
Yeah.
There were no meters on the street,
Right.
and it was not resident only.
Right.
So what they did was they swept through all the neighborhoods and they started regulating everything. So
Huh.
they put meters in front of all the ones, which honestly I don't prefer to park on Broadway. I rather be on a
Is there a
side
meter right
street.
in front of your house?
Yes.
Oh.
So the thing is, so they put meters where they didn't used to be meters.
Mhm.
So then that made them unavailable to somebody who's coming from
Yeah.
out of town, because you're not technically supposed to, if you're going to be working there for a bunch of hours,
It's
to
just
be
a
coming
2-hour
out
meter.
feeding
Right.
the meter, right?
Right.
That's not technically legal,
Right.
even though people do it.
Right.
So they regulated those, and then around the corner where there were some unregulated spaces, they turned them into resident only. So
Mm.
there was a time not that long ago when we simply had some unregulated spaces,
Yeah.
but this ideologue mindset that
Yeah.
says that
It's either- yeah.
everything's got to be regulated because
Mm.
either because of parking freezes or climate change or whatever, that we shouldn't allow that. Now the truth is we still have some,
I know.
and
I
I won't
think
say where,
No, I know there
But-
are around. You might
but
wanna
if you're in
tell me
some
about
city
them.
departments, you may find that they seem to
Well,
take
well,
care of themselves just fine.
You know what? Dennis Carlin brought up a good point about residential, because the proposal was to have residents permit parking special passes for businesses from like 8 to 5 or something like that.
For particular
spaces
streets,
particular
yeah.
streets that maybe that are
Right.
empty at 10 a.m. in the morning.
Right.
And he said something about
Somerville has some places where they do this.
well, he said where a commercial building sort of
Wraps around the
frontage,
corner.
wraps
Around the
maybe
corner.
those first 4 spaces could also,
Well,
and that makes so much sense to
okay,
me.
but I got to say,
you
in
know?
my neighborhood,
Yeah.
right on Broadway,
Which isn't
not only
really
do
commercial. I'm thinking
Well,
Mass Ave.
they used to have
Yeah.
like when the Hubley's Antiques
Well,
was
yeah,
here
okay.
doing
You
the
have
auctions.
like a coffee
It was
place.
in secondhand stores
Yeah,
and whatever.
okay.
Coffee places long before there were coffee places.
Right.
There. But the thing is that it was unregulated on Broadway, and then when
Right.
we wrapped around the corner, I think it was
So
like
it was like
the
that
first
in a
4
way.
spaces were unregulated.
Right.
So and I've lived there the
Yeah.
whole time, so we shared them. There's that
Yeah.
concept of sharing again.
Right.
How radical.
But now, rather than just completely take it away, maybe to give a or somebody, if that frontage is there, because I think that makes sense.
Right. Now, there
Yeah.
was a problem with the way it was,
Right.
especially for
It probably got
people.
abused.
If
right?
you lived within, say, a 10-minute walk of Central Square,
yeah.
what was happening, people would drive in from who knows where, Saugus,
Yeah.
park at an unregulated space,
And leave
and
it
then
there
walk
forever?
to the T,
Oh, right.
take the red line into town. And then that
Well,
was
even
fine.
Brookline, you can't do that. That's why it's 2
Right.
hour in unregulated.
Right, so you have to have,
2 hours
so you put
or,
limits, right?
Right.
So, but the thing is that for the most part, that wasn't really a problem, like at least in my neighborhood. But
But it
if
could
you were
be.
like right next to Central Square, that was a problem.
Well, I think it'd be
right?
more of a problem now with the.
Right.
Yeah.
But I just think maybe the city should rethink this
Yeah.
maximal regulation at all
Mhm.
costs,
Yeah.
at all spaces. There may be a perfectly feasible solution here, which is simply to unregulate some spaces
Yeah.
and then patrol them and
Well, enforcement, that's a whole other key.
and do a
of
little
this.
enforcement
Yeah,
on
yeah.
them. And then basically residents and
Mhm,
people who work at businesses or patrons at businesses
mhm.
will, sometimes it'll be residents, sometimes not, whatever. It'll be a little bit of competition, but that might be actually the
Right.
cheapest and easiest
And also, I
solution.
think, again, this was brought up to do a survey, or Alana brought this up, Councilor Mallon, about, when was the last parking space survey done? And we should do something now about how many cars are parked here, here, and here.
Right.
Kind of like the house, it's like,
Right.
let's get some numbers in,
Right.
you know?
But that, and I think
Yeah.
they actually are doing that. or are
Because
about to do
there's
it.
certain areas where, I mean, I know I drive my car to Harvard Square on Wednesday mornings to volunteer for family meals, and I try to find a permanent space. There,
Yeah.
it's very hard to find one in that area.
When you get closer to Harvard Square,
But
it's tough.
But
Yeah.
apparently, there's a public commenter that owns a business in Inman that said there are spaces.
Yes.
She's seen them. So
That's right.
I think, yes, I think
No,
it
I
needs
mean,
to be looked at.
I live closer to
Yeah.
Inman Square than any other square,
And
and
I
I can
bet
tell you that there's a
definitely,
little more
yeah.
flexibility
Right.
there. So
And
it's
some
not
people don't
uniform
mind
across the
walking
city.
2/10 of a mile if they could just leave their car for.
Hey, listen, you
yeah.
go out to 02138, you know, it's like
Yeah.
acres and acres of open spaces on the
No,
space.
no,
on
I
the
just
street.
said it isn't. Oh, right, not by
No,
Harvard
not
Square.
Harvard Square.
You're right.
So,
You're right.
So when you're
You're
trying
right.
to do an
Further
inventory for
out.
the city,
It's
you
true.
have to look at it neighborhood by
That's true.
neighborhood, sometimes even block by block.
Yeah.
So that's what needs to happen, I think.
Mhm.
But I really think the city should consider doing the radical notion
They do
of
need
just
yeah.
taking away the regulation on
Yeah.
some places, and we'll split it. You know.
Or like, I think there was one of the proposals to do a pilot for a year. Do that. Maybe take away
Try
some,
some
see what
things.
happens, and then
Yeah.
but really have to
Well,
actively
yeah,
watch
but
to see
the
who's walking
mindset
there.
some of the city
Yeah.
people do is they don't think in terms of unregulating anything. They think, how can we regulate in a different way?
Oh,
And
Yeah.
I'm simply suggesting this radical notion that
Mhm.
maybe just by taking the damn signs down and just not worrying about it, you might actually solve the problem.
yeah.
Cheaper
Well, they'd
and
have to say
easier.
something online because people always look up what are the parking regulations.
Yeah,
But you
yeah,
could just say if there's no signage, go ahead.
Right.
I don't know.
right. You know.
Ah,
But of course, if you see somebody and you say, "Wait a minute, that person here, he just got it here," and then you walk to the T to go work in downtown. You know, hey, listen, they rat people out on See Click Fix all the time. We'll just rat them out on that too, right?
yeah, no, well,
But,
that's true. You'd have to.
okay.
It couldn't be too near a T, I guess.
So that's the interesting thing. What at least I thought one
Yeah.
interesting thing about last night was that
So
when they went the rounds amongst the various city councilors. So it was
on
a
that
lot.
particular issue,
Yeah. So on the Inman Square, let's
Yeah.
find a way.
which
a
is
lot of
6-3
Maryland-
vote eventually. Yeah.
Right, so Alana Mallon and Sumbul Siddiqui was their order, but when
Right.
you went through, you could hear multiple city councils going, "Yeah, I think we should look at that. That sounds reasonable. That
Yeah.
sounds reasonable."
Yeah.
And I found that interesting because a year or two ago,
Yeah.
I think it was Denise Simmons had floated the notion about we should put more capacity in the Green Street garage, so that if they are going to follow through eventually with this notion about building housing on some of the surface parking lots, and I don't know any planner who likes surface parking lots, but they want to, so you put a little more structured parking over on Green Street, then that compensates for the taking away some of the parking on Bishop Allen. I said, okay, that sounds reasonable to me, but boy, that gets shot down like
But that was
mad
last year's
a
council.
year or something ago, because
Yeah.
it was like, don't you know, we shouldn't be permitting parking. Parking is bad, bad, bad.
Well, there's
and-
some more reasonable
and
tone to the council.
There was a touch
Yeah.
of reason, and I
Yeah.
thought it was a very promising thing.
So the order, I mean, who voted against? I think it was Toomey, Simmons, and Montgomery.
But the reason was not because I think they thought it was a bad notion.
It
It's
was
just that if
in
you're
this
only doing
where-
it, but if you're only doing
Oh.
it for the businesses, but
Yeah.
you are not respecting the requests from people like public school teachers who asked for the same thing and were told no, then that would be sending a bad message. So I think that's the reason why those particular
Maybe.
councils
Yeah. Well,
voted.
Toomey was
against it.
referring to
He-
the
he brought
people
that
who've been
up.
displaced from the building of the
Yeah.
the King's School and all.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean,
Yeah.
in my ideal world, our elected officials would have the capacity to be at least as much practical and pragmatic as they are ideological and righteous, and we've gone, I think maybe over the last term or so, we were drifting a little too much toward the righteous, and maybe now we have some more reasonable people in there, and maybe we're moving a little bit more toward the practical. I hope.
Well, you need voices on both ends. It's just how you communicate those voices, and I think the communication's been a little more civil and
Right.
more,
Right, but you just, people, you got to meet people halfway,
Yeah.
and
Hey, I'm a moderate. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
a Hillary Clinton person.
Right.
I mean, I'm sorry. I
yeah,
don't believe in radical change all at once.
yeah, no, I'm.
But I
kinda
think
cut-
you need
cutting
those
the same
voices
cloth.
to define what is possible. I think,
Right,
you know,
right. So I
but
think
I'm an
I'm
incrementalist.
fully welcoming of
Yeah.
all the good ideas.
Yeah.
By the way, there are some other little things that did happen. But we
Okay.
really enjoyed Central Flea here
Yeah, I
again in
missed all
University
those.
Park.
Yeah. Mhm.
Had a good time up at Mayfair and Harvard Square as well
You hit
over
both.
the weekend.
Yeah.
And I got a real plug in for a really wonderful thing we did on Saturday, which is this Jane's Walk, which is Jane Jacobs Walks,
Oh.
which we did around Central Square with Michael Kenny, former Boston Globe
Oh,
reporter,
I
great
heard
guy.
you reading it, but yeah.
And it was great, you
It's
know.
too early for me.
And we ended
Yeah.
up at the Middle East, which is the finest place in the universe.
Yeah.
Honestly, the best people on earth.
Yeah.
And so that was just a great time.
Good. Yeah,
Big
this-
controversy at Inman Square. There was, bending Hampshire Street and doing all that, and there was this controversy: are you going to cut down trees? And
Is this in reference to the walk?
no,
Oh.
it was separate. Anyway, they had a hearing in front of the Mid-Cambridge Neighborhood Conservation District Commission because they had to last night. And they
Oh.
approved
Last
the plan
night,
for
the
the
same
city.
night as the
Oh,
council?
there was a lot happening last night.
Wait, did you go to that? I thought
No, but I was on the way back. They were meeting with.
so this was a planning board meeting.
No, this was the
Oh.
Mid-Cambridge Neighborhood Conservation District
Oh.
Commission, and they said okay.
So they did have to approve it or not?
They
I
did
remember
have to
I brought
approve
that
it.
up
Oh
last
yeah,
week.
they
Okay.
did have to approve it.
So what did they say?
They
They
said
said
the city's okay, fine. I think they probably, I didn't hear all the details, but
Yeah.
so we'll, how are you gonna plant little bitty trees? Are you gonna try and do bigger? I'm sure they had some concessions, but basically the city can now come back to the city council, and the city council can file the necessary
Is that
rule
an
petitions.
entity through historical commission or is it a separate entity?
It's administered through the historical
It
commission.
is, okay, so it's
right.
separate than
But
the
it's
Mid-Cambridge
created by
thing.
ordinance.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, it's the
Okay.
same idea. Yeah.
Okay,
So that happened.
okay,
On
wow.
my street, there was a big controversy about reshaping the front of the City Hall annex. Not a big deal for most people, but the thing is, they were going
City
to
Hall
move the bike
annex.
parking and take over a piece of the park by replacing it with bike
What
parking.
park?
It's one at Inman and Broadway. It's just right next to the City Hall annex. And they approved the plan, but they said, sorry, you're not going to you're not taking away some of the park.
Oh, you're talking about that,
Good.
where there's little benches? Is that a park?
There's some benches in there, but the
Okay.
thing is it's it's a nice place.
Alright.
Anyway, it looks like we're out of time again.
Oh,
We could go on for hours, but maybe
No.
next week.
next week.
See ya.
Bye.